Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of the Overdrive Files. It's been 4 years, ladies and gentlemen, 4 years since Zack Snyder's Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice has come out in theaters. And man, the whole comic book landscape has shifted entirely, especially the DCEU, moving on from sort of the Snyderverse stuff kind of into this more family-friendly, comedic kind of tone, I guess. But not only just DC, but other comic book movies in general. You know, you got the Marvel stuff. That whole Infinity Saga is done and over with. What are they going to do with now? But just looking back at the last 4 years of comic book movies and just seeing everything we've gotten, I really feel like Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice is going to stand the test of time. I think this will be a movie that people look back on in 10, 15 years, and even longer, looking back at it and really appreciating just how different this movie was, especially in the landscape that it was in. You know, Marvel was at its peak at this time, and maybe not even yet with Infinity War and Endgame. Like those movies were massive at the box office, but I think this movie is going to be the one that sort of people will be going back to. And I just feel like this movie has such great rewatchability. And I have this article here from flickeringmyth.com that I want to get into here. But this is written by EJ Moreno. And just he's looking back at Batman v Superman 4 years later and just kind of what it was like as a fan and as a critic at the time, writing and sort of his experience with this movie as an online journalist. But I want to get into this article. I think I probably just read the whole thing, but he starts here. Do you remember what the pop culture landscape was like after Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice? Honestly, go back in your minds to 2016 and think about how wild it was for fans and haters of the film. To this day, I don't believe a single comic book movie has felt more polarizing as we approach the 4th anniversary. We are in a much different world. Now there's a rabid group of fans begging to see Zack Snyder's original vision to Batman v Superman sequel. Even the most passionate haters have retracted their claws and just have a numb feeling to the whole thing. It's quite strange to see because at one point it wasn't fun to be a fan of this film. But what about a diehard fan of the 2016 superhero epic? What is it like to be a fan of a movie that was a cultural reset? Let's dive into the legacy of Batman v Superman and what this film still means to someone who finds it to be the DC magnum opus. My first significant press screening as a critic was Batman v Superman, which came after months of small releases and ass-kissing. A lifelong DC Comics fan and suckered in by the marketing, I was pumped for this movie. The movie started and the insanely pretentious shot of young Bruce Wayne floating with the bats began. And that's the moment I knew this is for me. For the next nearly 3 hours of my life, the world of Zack Snyder's latest DCEU entry washed over me, totally enamored and completely blown away. There was a pep in my step as I walked out of the screening. Then a defining moment happened. The critics in front of me and behind me tore into the film, and they had held nothing back in their verbal assault. My world went black and white, and that Katy Perry, "You just have to say that you're fine" meme looped in my head. For the next months after that, it was a non-stop barrage of negative reviews and YouTube videos declaring it the death of the DC Extended Universe. As a fan of the movie, it wasn't fun dealing with all of this. Anytime you praised it online, 40 people would come and scream about how wrong you were. But still to this day, I'm firmly in the camp that this movie isn't bad by any means. Hell, I think it added to many elements to birth a new type of monster in the world of comic book movies. Batman v Superman is a movie you can't take too seriously and a movie no one takes seriously enough. There's a childlike wonderment to the battles and superhero actions, but there's also a dry political drama at the center of it. You are firmly planted in this all too real world, all while literal gods and monsters are running around. The film is a lesson in duality, blending two very different tones to bring to life what we love on the pages of comics. More specifically, I believe Batman v Superman is one of the first films to capture the feeling of DC Comics on a cinematic level. The best comic books are a mix of campiest moments and darkest scenes, which is what this achieves. You can't tell me Eisenberg's Lex isn't a lesson in camp acting, but he's also a grim look at real life characters like Elon Musk as well. There's just an example of the film's genuinely genius tonal choices. In all honesty, it still blows me away that director Zack Snyder and the writing team created a post 9/11 look at the superheroes, and it sold it to family audiences. It was like showing your kid a version of the Manchurian Candidate with the cast wearing capes and masks. Maybe it's the cinematic rebel in me, but I found that to be utterly hilarious and something unheard of at the time. Not saying any other brands copied another, but a lot of other superheroes got a lot more mature after this. In many ways, I consider Batman v Superman the first real superhero epic in terms of film genre. An epic is defined as a movie known for a style of filmmaking with large-scale, sweeping scope and spectacle. Think about comic book movies up until this point. None of them had the grand scale and spectacle of this piece. The infamous Dark Knight trilogy tries, but Nolan's goal to ground the franchise left out the spectacle part. And on the side of the Marvel Universe, we were still years away from their back-to-back epics Infinity War and Endgame. Up until this point in pop culture, no other superhero movie tried to tell this large of a story, jam this much comic book lore, and try to hit so many touchstones. That's not to say that everything is perfect about the film. No movie is perfect, and this has the problem of trying to do way too much at one time. Director Zack Snyder had the daunting task of trying to create an entire cinematic universe in just one film while dealing with the issues of a script penned by Chris Terrio and David S. Goyer. Slowing down the setting of a world around these central characters is a quick fix, but when everyone was trying to catch up with the MCU in such a short period, things like that will happen. It wasn't just the rushed feeling of the story that threw people off either. Batman v Superman had to make things feel new when dealing with two characters we've seen numerous times for decades. To expand the scale and vibe of the film, you need to shift these characters in a new direction. That's precisely what happened. No one knew fans would receive character changes so poorly, though. Especially after they gleefully accepted Christopher Nolan's dramatic take on the universe and characters just a few years before. Nolan removed the comic book soul of the Batverse characters in hopes to make something feel closer to his aesthetic. Snyder went directly to the pages of some of the most famous comics when bringing this universe to life. Even he changed characters, it was still a conscious 180 reflection of what we were more used to seeing. For a longtime DC fan, these changes felt like seeing an Elseworld story brought to life. If you don't know what Elseworlds are when dealing with DC Comics, it's basically an excuse to change characters, tell different stories without ruining the canon. Batman v Superman felt like an Elseworld story with Superman losing his trademark smile and Batman feeling like a grittier, darker version than usual. Maybe it's because I've read numerous comics with both characters seen by the Donner era Superman as well as the cinematic Batman universe and binged every animated series. Still, I welcomed these changes, especially when it was clear that the entire point of them changing them was to rebuild them from the ground up. In most circles, there's a saying that you have to know the rules before you break the rules. If you want to rebel against something as a filmmaker, writer, or painter, you must understand what you're rebelling against. Zack Snyder and company clearly knew what they were doing, making direct choices to shift these characters. They were breaking the rules of DC, but doing it for reasons and with genuine knowledge. And that's where my love of this movie comes from. This feels like it loves being a comic book movie. Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice has no problem in being a campy, weird, extremely dark superhero epic. I admire that, especially now when one of the biggest comic book movies of the last year is created by a guy who didn't want it to be anything like a comic book movie. For 4 years later, and there's still nothing like the hate, love, and conversations about this film. In 10 years, I expect Batman v Superman to still be in the hearts and mouths of so many people. It'll take another cosmic shift in the pop culture landscape to dethrone this misunderstood masterpiece. Great article, E.J. Moreno from Flickering Myth. And one of the reasons why I wanted to share this is because This is kind of how I felt watching this movie 4 years ago. And you know, the theatrical version isn't I didn't necessarily like that version all that much when comparing it to the Ultimate Edition. You know, it's just when I saw the theatrical version, it felt jarring at moments. I don't know, it's just the editing where they had to cut out those 30 minutes of footage to get the runtime down to 2.5 hours, but it felt jarring, and especially with all the Clark Kent Superman stuff, the Ultimate Edition really adds some cohesion to the film, and you know, it doesn't make Clark Kent appear to be an a-hole at times, and just all the more Clark Kent like investigative stuff that he's trying to do on Batman. It just kind of ties it all together, and as well as like the Lois Lane stuff with the bullet from Africa and all that. I think it just really ties the whole film together and makes it feel cohesive. But man, looking back at this movie, it's hard to believe that it's been 4 years already. And you know, the more and more I go back to watching this, I just love it more and more. It's like a fine wine. It ages. It gets better as it ages, you know. But I rewatched it the other day, and it's just one of those movies I just don't get sick of. And you know, if you're a fan of this movie and people give you shit, just ignore them. You know, like everybody has the right to like whatever they like. You know, you know, I'm not one to go online and be a keyboard warrior and add criticism to somebody who's shitting on this movie because they don't like it. Whatever. I like this movie, so I'm going to rewatch it whenever I want. And I'm glad that I like this movie. I'm glad that I like this movie and I'm able to put this on whenever I want. And, you know, I feel like that's a privilege to me. So anyway, it's been 4 years. I just kind of wanted to highlight this movie, and I feel like people will come around to this movie over the years, and you know, it's still it's a conversational piece. Like, and there's still stuff on Twitter, like, I mean, people just always talking about this movie. And can you say that about the 2012 Avengers movie? I don't really think so. Or even Captain America Civil War. Not really. I feel like Marvel fans have just moved on to the latest and greatest, I guess. You know, whether it's Infinity War or Endgame, it's just they just move on. But anyway, I do have another topic here. We're going to get into a little bit unfortunate news in the DC side of things. Wonder Woman 1984 release pushed to late summer amid the coronavirus pandemic. So the superhero standalone pick was set to hit theaters in early June, but will now go out in August. Warner Brothers is pushing back the release of its upcoming superhero tentpole Wonder Woman 1984 by 2 months due to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. The sequel, which was set to bow in theaters in North America on June 5th, will now hit the big screen in August 14th. So yeah, more than 2 months. It's really unfortunate what's going on, not only just with everybody in the world and the virus, but just with all of that, the sort of the domino effect that it's causing. Not only school year or the school seasons being canceled, the end of the year for a lot of schools are just probably going to be postponed or ended. I'm not sure how all that's going to work, but the theater chains, there was a theater chain in my local area, one of the small ones that I don't really go to. They closed up for good. I don't think they're going to be reopening. But all these theater chains, man, like how are they going to survive? Especially a lot of the smaller ones. It's really unfortunate. And not only theaters, but small businesses in general. But, you know, couple of the big movies that were postponed, Black Widow, obviously, James Bond, No Time to Die, those have been pushed back. And how's this going to affect we're seeing the summer blockbuster season pushed back. I don't know if they've announced if Top Gun Maverick has moved, but that's that comes out like June 24th, 25th. I'm sure that's going to be the next one to move, but how's this going to affect the fall and winter movie season, like fall and Christmas time? I just hope Dune doesn't get moved in December. That's the one movie that I'm really dying to see, and I hope they don't push that back. But we'll see. But guys, let me know your thoughts on all the topics down below. What do you think of Batman v Superman? Are you someone that saw it in theaters and wasn't a fan of it, but you've sort of come around to it? Let me know down below in the comment section, as well as your thoughts on the Wonder movie news. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm Rex Overdrive. I'll see you next time.